Hello, everyone. Welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. U.S. President Trump has provoked a maximum tariff crackdown on China, and China has hit back hard by imposing export controls on rare earths. In fact, China's actions are all in line with international practices for implementing controls, which has already made Western countries complain bitterly, losing their previous arrogance. To ensure that the control measures are properly enforced, foreign media once reported that China introduced a tracking system requiring manufacturers to provide additional information such as end customers. As expected, this move has again drawn complaints from a handful of Western companies. They want to buy China's rare earth products, but at the same time, they don't want to accept China's regulations, criticizing the measures on the grounds of potential leaks of trade secrets. However, more companies have chosen to comply with China's regulations. Facing increasingly depleted rare earth inventories, most companies have no choice but to set aside so-called security concerns. They say that as long as they can secure supply, they are willing to do whatever China requires. According to a report by the Financial Times on June 12, some Western companies claim that the business information China is demanding is too sensitive, and that providing it has become a condition for approving rare earth magnet exports. However, this has already sparked concerns about the potential misuse of such information or the leakage of trade secrets. Several companies and official guidance documents indicate that, during the export approval process for critical minerals and magnets, the Chinese side requires companies to provide production details in customer lists. In response to the rare earth issue, China's Ministry of Commerce gave its latest reply on June 12, stating that as a responsible major country, China fully takes into account the legitimate needs and concerns of all countries in the private sector, and reviews export license applications for rare earth-related items in accordance with laws and regulations. It has already approved a certain number of compliant applications according to the law, and will continue to strengthen the approval process for compliant applications. Frank Eckard, the CEO of German magnet manufacturer Manosphere, said that China is requiring companies to disclose confidential information about their products and business in order to obtain export licenses. He said that this is China obtaining information through official channels, not by stealing it. According to the report, under the current rare earth export licensing system, China requires foreign companies to submit detailed information about company operations, employees, end use, and production. Guidelines from China's Ministry of Commerce on the export of dual-use goods indicate that companies may also be required to provide photos of products and facilities, as well as details of past business collaborations. Andrea Pratisi, the supply chain director of Italian speaker manufacturer B&C Speakers, said, "They ask for a lot of things, really a lot." The company submitted photos and videos of their production lines, as well as market information, customer lists, and some customer orders, but the customer names were all blurred out. Pratisi said that the company has already had 2 orders approved, and a third one is still waiting for review by the Chinese side. He said, "We have no choice. If we don't do this, they'll just set all your documents aside and wait for you to provide everything they ask for." He also pointed out that their company has nothing to hide, they're just a speaker manufacturer. A Chinese export control lawyer, who wished to remain anonymous, said that the Chinese side often asks companies to provide information about the production and operational processes of the end user. Meanwhile, Matthew Schwolos, a product manager at a UK-based magnet manufacturer, said that their company was rejected several times in April due to a lack of end-user evidence. He said that now they provide photos from the magnet production process, detailed information about the end use, and customer profiles of the end users, all of which have helped the company obtain several export licenses. Rare earth exports are usually handled by Chinese suppliers who submit applications to the local tax bureau on behalf of their clients. Schwolo said there are indeed concerns about leaking customer information, and he advises clients not to include any trade secrets or intellectual property information in their application materials. Jens Eskelund, president of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China, said that the level of detail required by the Chinese side makes it difficult for companies in sensitive industries to comply and apply for export licenses. Eskelund said that for some applications, you need to specify the intended use in great detail, which raises concerns about intellectual property. However, another European executive, who wished to remain anonymous, said that at the moment, in order to meet the demand for rare earth magnets, most companies no longer have time to worry about so-called long-term security concerns. These companies say that as long as they can secure supply, they are willing to do whatever China requires. The Chinese side has repeatedly emphasized that rare earths and related items have clear dual-use attributes for both military and civilian purposes, and that imposing export controls on them is a common international practice. The Chinese government reviews export license applications for dual-use items in accordance with laws and regulations. For applications that meet the requirements, China will grant approval and facilitate compliant trade. On April 2 this year, the Trump administration in the United States wielded tariffs globally, imposing so-called reciprocal tariffs, with tariffs on China reaching as high as 145%. In response, China immediately introduced a series of targeted countermeasures. In addition to raising tariffs, China also imposed export controls on 7 categories of medium and heavy rare earth-related items. At the time, the Financial Times quoted industry insiders as saying that China was in the process of establishing an export licensing system. And back in December last year, China also announced strict controls on exports to the U.S. of gallium, germanium, rhenium, superhard materials, graphite, and other related dual-use items. On June 4, Reuters cited multiple sources saying that China had unveiled a high-level plan to establish a rare earth product information tracking system as early as last June. But it was only recently brought up again. The report suggests that this additional layer of scrutiny indicates that China's export controls on rare earths and related magnets could become a long-term policy, especially since China is almost monopolistic in production in these areas. To support the implementation of these control measures, on May 9, the Office of the National Export Control Work Coordination Mechanism organized a special meeting with various departments to crack down on the smuggling and illegal export of strategic minerals, which drew international attention at the time. Some analysts believe that this move by China is aimed at strengthening the enforcement of a series of previous export control measures on critical minerals. These minerals are crucial to the U.S. defense industry. According to the latest report from a U.S. think tank, due to the impact of China's export controls, U.S. military industrial companies only have enough rare earth reserves to last 3 months, while over 90% of global rare earth processing is still firmly controlled by China. What's making the West anxious isn't just China's rare earths. On June 8, the Financial Times published an article stating that China also holds a dominant position in the production of new types of super-strong magnets, transistors, batteries, advanced chips, and software. This forms a powerful industrial synergy ecosystem in fields such as electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, drones, robotics, sensors, and smartphones, along with the corresponding semiconductor and artificial intelligence technologies. Analysts say that the leverage balance is quickly tilting in China's favor, and it's only now that Trump and his team are starting to realize this fact. Looking at a few points together, firstly, if China hadn't taken strong action, the global manufacturing industry might not have truly understood just how big a bargaining chip China holds with its rare earth resources. Secondly, the Western world used to think that China was easy to push around, but now with just one decisive move from China, American and European companies are forced to kneel. This shows that they only believe it when they see the consequences for themselves. Thirdly, in the past, if China had taken such action, especially back when Biden's kind of leftist thinking was dominant, the Western media would definitely have launched a coordinated attack on China, criticizing it for monopoly, being non-market-oriented, protectionism, and so on. But compared to Trump's time, China is actually following proper rules and procedures now. As long as foreign companies apply according to the regulations and conduct their business properly, they will naturally be granted the necessary permits. Fourth, as for the claim that applying for permits means being controlled by China, the fact is, this system was invented by the US and the West. For decades, they have been using the same tactics to control China. Now that China has developed into the world's most comprehensive supply chain powerhouse, the US and the West really need to learn to look at China on equal footing. This global wave of rare earth shortages among companies has also caused the so-called anti-China alliance led by the US to start looking out for their own interests. The Indian government has already asked the state-owned mining giant, Indian Rare Earths Limited, IRL, to suspend its 13-year-long rare earth export agreement with Japan, prioritizing domestic demand instead. The aim is to reduce India's reliance on Chinese rare earths. IRL also plans to develop domestic rare earth processing capabilities, aiming to break China's global dominance in this sector. This strategic resource has already become a key bargaining chip in the ongoing escalation of international trade disputes. Since April this year, China has restricted the export of rare earth materials, putting pressure on global car manufacturers and high-tech producers. India's Commerce Minister, Piyush Goyal, recently instructed IRL to immediately stop exporting rare earth resources to Japan, especially aluminum, during a meeting with executives from the automotive and other industries, since aluminum is a key raw material for permanent magnets in car motors. However, according to a Reuters report, India may not be able to halt supplies to Japan right away, as these exports fall under a bilateral government agreement. IRL hopes that this issue can be resolved amicably through negotiation, as India considers Japan a friendly nation. But in any case, that's just what they say on the surface. The bottom line is, no matter how friendly two countries are, when it comes to their own interests, there's no room for sentiment.